We'll move it back and start the meeting. Well, good morning and welcome. I wanted to echo what Ralph said and thank Phyllis for doing such a wonderful job last week to start off this series. She and Bill have an amazing ability. I know we all agree to put things into context. We also have the benefit of their travels and leadership into tours into the Holy Land so that they can provide significant insight into this particular study. As Bill's email reminder highlighted for us yesterday, today's theme is following Jesus in your storms. As he aptly pointed out, the recent events have kept storms and their aftermath in our thoughts continually, so this is a timely lesson. On the day of the tragic flood, we learned that one of our Houston granddaughter's 8-year-old classmates and friends who'd been attending Camp Mystic was missing along with her cabin mates and her counselor. Early in the week, the family learned that she'd not survived. On Friday, they had her services, and my son, who attended with his wife and her classmate, our oldest granddaughter, estimated that over 1,000 people attended the service. After the service, the family hosted a huge reception following the service to celebrate their daughter's life. I'm sure we'll see that scene play out many times in the coming weeks. As we start this week's lesson, I want to highlight some of the significant events that took place near or at the Sea of Galilee. Mary and Joseph settled in an area west of the Sea of Galilee. And it's also here where Jesus saw and called Simon Peter, his brother Andrew, as well as James and his brother John to follow him. It's here where he appointed the 12 disciples. And obviously I could go on. But before we review the video this morning, I wanted to pose one of the questions that you probably came across in our study guide. Knowing all of you as I do, virtually every one of us has faced a significant challenge. And I was wondering if there was any of you that might want to share how you tended to respond when you saw trouble looming over the horizon. Anyone?
Well, I think that what comes to mind, you've heard the story before, but when I took Carol back to Mayo Clinic for the second time, been up there 10 days before in the fall, and when we went back in the spring of 2017, my daughter came up. I got up there first with Carol, and I knew I couldn't get her up to everything's outpatient up there. So I had to call Lisa, and she flew up and got there at midnight to help me get her to the appointments. And then on the third day, we finally had enough tests to where they told us that she had ALS. And right then and there, we knew we needed the help of the Lord just to deal with it. Just to let that sink in, and he sustained us throughout the ordeal. It was a strong reminder of how our faith is so critical in times of storms.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
Ours is before Ralph and I started dating, my life was hunky-dory, houses, I had a boy toy, I mean, everything was great. And so one day, I ended up reconnecting with Ralph and his partner, and his partner, of course, was really cool about it, because I could hear him sitting in the next chair going, "Dude, that's Ralph." So we eventually, I think I had asked him out to go to a wedding. But anyway, so we get together, and almost immediately, my father's kidney problems escalated. So he meets my dad for the first time, and my dad's in hospital bed and lasted for a couple of days after that. So I was like, wow, Lord, this was really good timing. And I forgot what happened next, but I think it was when I got the infection in my shoulder, that happened pretty close after that. And I'm like, nothing has ever happened to me before. I broke a pinky toe once, but that stuff didn't happen, so I didn't realize how much I needed to up my prayer game, I think. But what kept hitting me in the face every time, 'cause there was a series of things, and he was the one that solved the problem. And finally I go, oh, you sent Ralph. I'm sorry. And sometimes I think that we have so much of this stuff in our face. And we're praying and thinking, okay, God, you need to solve it. And he's like, I did, and it amazes me that sometimes still when something happens, that my first inclination is like, oh, okay, I gotta pray more and God's gonna solve this. When now I learned kind of more to look around and see how he's already positioned solve it. It might not be the way I want him to solve it, of course, but he's got my team there. So to make sure that we can get through it. So I would appreciate a few less complications in my life. That's the way life goes, apparently, now that I've put that, but, I know for a fact that God put us together again. And so I have to trust that he can put other things together.
That's a blessing for sure. I know when we went through I'll call it a crisis now, looking back on it, when I received my diagnosis and the doctor said we could treat you here, but we're better off really getting you to downtown, big hospital in downtown Baylor. So I've called an ambulance and they're going to take you down. We've got somebody waiting on you. About that time, the door opened and two guys come through in the gurney and they put me in the gurney and off we went in the ambulance to Dallas, and Sherry followed us. And when we got to the hospital, there was a doctor and another doctor waiting for us in the room, which was obviously welcome. Our head was swimming, not really knowing what the next steps held, but it was very interesting and quite timely, and I'm sure not coincidental that the chaplain from our church happened to be visiting the church that's got hospital. Her name was Tracy. She didn't know us, but she heard we were there and she came over and said a prayer with us there in the room. We prayed and it was like everything changed. Just put it in perspective. And with that, we look bigger and thought bigger and look forward as opposed to back. And we can put one step in front of the other and move forward. So, anyone else? Yes, sir.
Mine would be when Victor was having a heart issues, went into the doctor's office for just a check and basically a follow-up. And we ended up, said, sending you to the ER, right across the street. So we took her over to the ER, and as soon as we got the ER, we got to put you in the room. And then the doctor came back and she said, okay, so what I've got to do is I've got to stop your heart. So I'm going to give you this medicine. Your heart is going to stop. The half-life is like a second. So a second later, your heart's going to start back up. But just to be sure, we're going to put the copper things on, you don't have the panels ready and all that. And to sit there and watching the monitor, you can see the heart rate go down to zero. It came right back up again. And then he said, that didn't work, so we're gonna do it again. And I think, wow, oh my gosh, just are so worried, so prayerful. That could be
Yeah. I've worked in those kind of things, they did that to my dad, but signing the paper saying that you approved it. We're like, no, I ain't signing that, you know, but, and the doctors are all like, we do this all the time. But it's so scary for a person, I mean, that just is not what your heart's supposed to do. Oh. Twice.
Well, thank everybody for sharing. If anyone have anything else at this point? Yes, ma'am.
Many of you know that I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2018, shortly after my birthday. And then Joe was in memory care out. And when I got all the final diagnosis and everything, the doctor said, just go home, close the door, just have to cry. But I didn't know how I was going to take care of him and myself. Shows up at my door. And he said, understand what's going on and how they react with this. And the rest is history. We went out and stayed with Joe, and I had all the tests done prior to surgery. Just was there for that. So I know that was always good. No doubt.
You even use a guy like me.
Even like you, Roger.
I have to say, in my experience, I've never seen a group come alongside one another. They're great, it'd be great.
Yeah, I
Just
just,
show up that day. It was just,
yeah, I would have to do it. Yeah, I have to say, this class has just been, I can't even explain it, so supportive of food, just every visits and everything, and you know, it's so hard when you take your life to the hospital, say, his oncologist that had been his oncologist for 6.5 years says there's nothing else we can do. You're just going to have to go home on hospice. And Charlie and I had slightly talked about that, but not real in depth, as I didn't really want to talk about that. And you know, I remember sharing and Jim that first night or second day we were home, here they came with just a flood of food. I mean, so much. And all of Charlie's children were going to be coming in, and you know, it just was so much love shown. And I know that's how I got through this journey. You know, I don't have to cry every day anymore, but it is, you know, something that has been really hard. And to lose him, because he was my everything, he really was. And you know, and I had lived alone for 14 years, but it feels different now than it did after I got a divorce and lived alone. And I was still younger and working and all that busyness like that, but I know God is taking care of me. I have no doubt about it.
We all miss Charlie, but we're so glad you're good now.
Thank you.
Why don't we watch the video?
Jim, Well, we try.
Yes, sir.
Good, Bill.
Before you start the movie, would you mind moving your podium 6 inches forward, because we can't see anything but your hands?
Oh, okay. So I'm gonna move back. We're gonna do the video and then we'll come back.
Okay.
Are you muted?
Session 2 of In the Footsteps of the Savior. Last week, we looked at the stories of Jesus healing the woman with the issue of blood and raising the daughter of Jairus to life. Both of those miracles took place in the city of Capernaum, located on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee. In this session, we're going to focus on the sea itself. Now, as you read through the Gospels, you might get the impression that there are large bodies of water scattered across Israel. The Sea of Galilee, the Sea of Tiberias, Lake Gennesaret, Lake Kinneret. But those descriptors all describe the same body of water. Located about 60 miles north of Jerusalem, the Sea of Galilee is Israel's largest freshwater lake. It rests at almost 700 feet below sea level, which makes it the lowest freshwater lake in the world. The water in the sea comes from snowmelt and runoff from local mountains, which combine with the headwaters of the Jordan River to fill up a geographic bowl in the shape of a harp. This probably explains the original name of the lake, Kinneret, as the Hebrew word for harp is Kinnor. The Sea of Galilee is bounded on all sides by hills. However, on the eastern side, those hills can reach a height of 2,000 feet, and the mountains are a source of cool and dry air, while the climate around the sea is semi-tropical with moist and warm air. And when the cold air comes down from the mountain and mixes with the warm around the sea, it can create some furious storms. You might expect a sizable freshwater lake to be a popular place in Jesus' day, and you would be right. The people lived near it, fished on it, drank from it, and traveled across it from town to town. However, as you will see in this session, a certain man residing in Capernaum caused quite a stir one night when he walked across that sea, and did so in the midst of one of those raging storms. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, and he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now, when evening came, he was alone there. But the boat was in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Now, in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went walking to them on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled. They said, "It is a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them. And he said, "It is I. Be of good cheer. Don't be afraid." And Peter answered and said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And so Jesus had come. And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind and he saw the waves, he was afraid. And he sunk like a stone. Lucado translation. And he began to sink, and he cried out, "Lord, save me!" And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" When he got into the boat, the wind ceased. Those who were in the boat came and worshiped him. And they said, truly, you are the Son of God. The Sea of Galilee is relatively small, isn't it? I mean, when we read about it in Sunday school as a kid, I pictured it as big as the Pacific Ocean. 13 miles long at its longest, some 7.5 miles wide at its widest. Yet this diminutive state of the sea makes it more subjected to those winds that howl down upon the water out of the Golan Heights, turning this relatively calm body of water into what? A blender of 10-foot waves, up and down, up and down. It can happen several times over the course of a winter. And that's exactly what happened to the followers. The lake became a popcorn popper, lifting that boat, spinning it around, plopping it down. Lightning zigzagged through the dark sky. Thunder roared, thunder popped, and the disciples screamed. Galileans came to expect the storms. I'm thinking that Matthew, the tax collector, is wondering what in the world he's gotten himself into. And his arms are wrapped around that mast, and his cheek is pressed right up against the wood, and he's shivering from the cold. And the fishermen among them, they know exactly what's about to happen. And so they start rowing. They start rowing. They row the boat. But they do not get very far because they're rowing into the wind. And that night has come as that day came, with turbulence. Life comes with storms. Life comes with storms. The atmospheric conditions of this fallen world create a low pressure system that generates struggles and stress and challenges. I'm not telling you anything when I tell you no one gets through life scot-free. No one. No one. Not the old, not the young, not the rich, not the poor, not the healthy, not the unhealthy. Everybody has to face their share of storms. That person sitting to your right, they know what a storm is like. And that person in front of you, they know a storm or two. And that person to your left, yeah. They've had to zip up the jacket and pull out the umbrella. And many of you are facing a storm right now. Peter and his fellow storm riders, they knew they were in trouble. They knew what these storms could do. They had weathered them before. Sunlight was a distant memory. Rain fell in buckets. Winds whipped the sails. And that boat lurched like a kite in a March wind. Matthew gives us the best description. The boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Could a more discouraging sentence be written? The boat was now in the middle, not near the coast, but in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves. Not just riding on the waves, but tossed, lifted 10 feet up into the air, and then plopped down into the valley. Between the next wave, they held on because here comes another wave. They could feel it, they couldn't see it because it was in the middle of the night, and the wind was contrary. No matter how hard they rowed, they could not make any progress. Has anyone seen Jesus? What do you mean? He told us to get in the boat. We only did what he said when he told us to do. He said, get in the boat. Didn't he say, yeah, he said it. Where is he? I don't know. If only Jesus were here. I mean, it's one thing to be in a storm because you disobeyed. It's another thing to be in a storm because you did what you thought was right. And here you're in a storm anyway. But for, hang on to your hat, 9 hours. Not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, not six, not seven, not eight, but 9 hours. They fought the storm. They couldn't get from one side to the next. But then, after 9 hours, the most remarkable thing happens. The disciples spot someone coming on the water. And they assume it's a ghost and they cry out with fear. Again, about 4 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them walking on the water. They were scared out of their wits, one translation said. A ghost, they said, crying out in terror. They didn't expect Jesus to come to them this way. Neither did you. We expect him to come in the form of peaceful hymns, a nice morning devotional, Easter Sunday, or a quiet retreat. We never expect Jesus to come in the midst of a cancer diagnosis. We never expect that we'll see him most clearly when we're bankrupt. We never expect that just as the man breaks your heart, Christ enters the broken place. We never expect Jesus to come in the middle of the storm, but that's when he comes, because that is when he is most seen. Jesus responds to their fear with an invitation that is worthy of inscription on every church cornerstone. Here it is, transliterated, not translated, but word for word for word. Here's what the disciples heard. Courage, I am. Fear not. Percussive, staccato. Courage. He speaks courage into the storm. I believe he is not just calling for courage, he is releasing supernatural courage. Courage. Most translations have Jesus saying, "It is I," or "I am here." The literal translation is simply, "I am. I am." So Jesus here is not just announcing his presence on the sea. He is announcing his authority over the sea. I am. I am. And the waves broke. I am. And the winds begin to listen. I am. And the lightning retreats. Because I am is here. I am. I wonder if you would allow Jesus to proclaim his name over your problem. I am is spoken over your cancer. I am is spoken over your sadness and grief. I am is spoken over your concern for your children. I am. Is anybody going to help me? God says, I am. Is anyone listening? God says, I am. Is anyone coming? God says, I am. I am. I am came to the disciples on the storm, and with these words, Jesus declared himself to be the commander of the storm. Peter got the point. I know we pick on Peter, but Peter understood that all of a sudden the commander of the storm was present. That's why the scripture says, Lord, if you command me to come to you on the water, I will. Peter knew who was commanding the shots. And so Jesus did. And since Peter would rather be out of the boat with Christ than in the boat without him, Jesus had come. And when Peter had come out of the boat, he walked on the water to Jesus. As long as Peter's focus was on Christ, he had courage. But the very moment he looked somewhere besides the face of Christ, he was afraid. And he began to sink. Some years ago, I had a diagnosis that gave me some fear. I've had some issues with my heart over the last couple of years, or a few years. But a few years ago, there was one situation I had in which my heart would not stop beating so fast. I felt like I was running a marathon all day long. My heart rate was somewhere between 110 and 120 all day long. And it was like I was sending Morse code. And I was just exhausted. And finally, I got an appointment with the cardiologist. He checked me out. And he said, Max, I want you to go sit in my office. I'll come in and talk to you. You know, when I was in high school, I didn't like being sent to the office. And as a grown-up, I still don't like being sent to the office. But I went in and I sat in the office of the cardiologist, and I looked up on the wall and I saw one diploma after another. And this diploma from that university. Somebody else gave him a second degree from that university. Over here, his wife gave him the third degree. He had diplomas everywhere. And the more I saw his diplomas, the better I felt. In comes the nurse. She hands me a sheet of paper. And I read words like atrial fibrillation, arrhythmia, stroke, blood clot. And I felt myself begin to sink. And I realized I could either stare at the problem or I could stare at the accomplishments of the physician. And so I put the sheet to the side and I said, I think I'll read the diplomas. You will never lead a life absent problems, but you will always have a life in which you have the presence of the I am. So the I am shows up in the middle of your problems. And he says, let me show you my diplomas. Let me show you who I am. Let me show you what I have done. And the Hebrew writer says we must pay closer attention to what we have heard so that we do not drift away from it. We must pay closer attention to what we have heard so that we do not drift away from it. Whatever it takes, my friends, pay closer attention to what God has done so that you do not drift away from it. Isn't it amazing that Jesus, so patient with Peter, extended his hand somewhere into these very waters, and he pulled a sinking Peter up. And then within a moment, somehow the two of them supernaturally were in a boat. And the minute that Jesus was in the boat, the storm was still. Jesus wants to get in the boat of your struggles. He wants to get in the boat of your problems. He wants to get into the middle of it. Because he knows that once you face him, you will have courage to face your problems. If your problems are too big, your vision is too low, lift up your eyes and focus on him.
Is that better, Bill?
Oh, yeah, we like that handsome face.
I'll pay you later. Well, that's quite the video. I can't help but think about another story that's come out of the recent week. It got a lot of notoriety locally, and then I saw it in the national press as well. You may have read it, but I'd like to just touch on it briefly. A lady whose husband passed away lived in the Hunt area. It just so happens that I think it was her grandmother wrote the book, The Secret Garden. Have you heard her story? It's amazing to me that she had all of her family there, her son, her daughter, all the grandkids, 2 dogs. And she woke up in the middle of the night and saw the water coming, and she said it looked like an ocean was coming in. And so she woke up the children, she woke up her kids. They climbed up a rope ladder up into a loft where the kids normally stayed. She looked down, they saw the dogs floating on some cushions. They got the dogs, and somehow or another, with the use of a couple of lobster boys, managed to poke holes in the roof and then work their way through the insulation. And one of her, I think her son and her grandson or son-in-law had a pocket knife, and he started working on the wood that was keeping them in the building. In the meantime, the water continued to come up. And they managed to cut a hole in the outside of the roof and push it out. And then the son or the son-in-law went through the hole and dropped into that water and swam across and was safe. And he came back and got the others. And they all made it out.
Where did they get them? Where
And,
they?
they all survived. It's just, it reminds me of the thing with Peter, command me to come into the water, and they did. And obviously it was a holy moment, man.
They had to swim across.
Yeah, apparently it wasn't a really long way, but they were able to get to safety, and all of them survived. So quite the story. So it's audience participation time again. So what was Jesus doing while the disciples were in the storm? Why do you think he told them to get in the boat ahead of him, knowing that they would face the storm? Anyone?
Teaching opportunity of an extraordinary nature.
Modern days, we call that a Kodak moment. Yeah, that's right. And where was he when he told them to get in the boat? What did he do?
Went up on the mountain and prayed.
Right.
Also watching them.
Very instructional. I think, as I reflected on it, I think he wanted, as you said, Roger, I think he wanted them to maybe experience what life would be like without him. And as Max said, that storm went on for hours. Certainly had their attention.
Or, in a way, he was teaching them what their life could be like with him.
Exactly.
Because they were
Flip side of the
for
coin.
tremendous ministry, right?
Exactly. Anyone else? When they saw him walking on the water, they were terrified and they thought he was a ghost. But what did he say to calm their fears?
We're not.
Fear not. It is I. And what is the literal rendering of his response, and what does that say about his power over the storm? Bill and Phyllis, you all are certainly welcome to join anytime.
But I am.
I am.
Bill.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Bill.
Oh,
Can't hear you. I think you're muted.
the button. There we go. Well, I think we all remember Moses asking, so what am I supposed to tell these people? What's your name? And he said, I am. I suppose we all remember that. And I think people over the many thousands of years since then have tried to figure out what to call this one that we don't know what his name is. And apparently, that's a pretty good thing for us to remember. I know Paul Tillich called him the ground of being. Some people are still calling him the universal consciousness. I don't know what you call him, that Hebrews started out calling him God, but no question, he sure is able, like Max said, to be, I am what you need. I am all there is that you need. So I think that's a great memory of Moses.
Yes, sir. Thank you. In terms of his power over the storm, I don't think he's merely announcing his presence on the sea. But as Max puts it, this is not a cry of identity, but to Bill's point, it's a claim of divinity. Right? It underscores the point. You know, Peter took a bold step by walking on the water towards Jesus, but he started to sink when he saw the wind. Jesus caught him and asked him why he doubted. Why do you think we likewise tend to doubt Jesus' ability to calm our storms?
To become like Peter.
I'm sorry?
They act like Peter, they get afraid.
Right?
And we look away, that,
We look away.
we look away, and once you've looked away from the Lord, you're gonna sink. But you could go back to Him. You will rise again.
And maybe we don't think big enough. We tend to focus at the problem at hand rather than Max saying, look at the diplomas at the wall. Look at the sunsets, look at the sunrise. Look at all that he's accomplished.
We tend to look at all the other things we can control as a solution first, you know, and look at this solution, that solution. If I talk to this person or that person, you may have heard the expression that God is the knot at the end of the rope. That implies to me that we're trying a lot of different things all the way down. To just when we're about to give up, you hit that knot. And you know, that's the only real solution.
Yeah.
I
Sure.
think sometimes we want an immediate answer, immediate relief, and it comes in this process, strengthening it immediate. Sometimes we don't give the grace where it needs to be, but I think in the process of going through it, you rely on Him. I mean, I don't think we would give credit to Him if everything was immediate fixed right away.
I think also, sorry, go ahead, Liz.
The night of the flood, you know, areas are starting to come out about the number of people are missing, girls that were drowned, and I got a text from my brother, which I think happened very often, but he said, I'm so angry. He said, how could a loving God allow this to happen to these young girls? You know, and it's almost like, I don't know. I said, I don't know if anybody has an answer to that question. But I do know it's gonna test your faith and you're gonna have a decision to make. You know, and it's exactly what we're talking about, you know, is your faith strong enough that you see it at a time when God is there with you breathing? Or do you move the other direction and say, you're not my God if you allow this?
Right. Yes, ma'am.
I kept thinking, only let the little children come to me, and that those children know with Jesus, and that's the only way I can really solace, because it's just devastating. It is, and how those parents would feel.
Right.
And I think that's the only comfort they can, and that's gonna be hard today in life.
So you think of, to that, I was thinking, I thought about the fact that they were all at a faith-based camps. You know, and we all saw the video of the girls singing the hymns, the ones that got rescued, you know, singing hymns going back across the water and that bus and truck, whatever they were in. And it is just inspiring, you know, that they continue, you know, at their young age, you know, to worship, knowing that they had lost a lot of their friends who'd been at the camp with them. But I was also thinking earlier to your original question, I think sometimes we have short memories. God does amazing things. And I could point to everybody in this room. I mean, I look at you. I mean, you know, and so I think, you know, as God stepped into the middle of your battle and brought the right doctors and the right medicines and everything that helps you get through that. You know, if I go through the same thing at some point in my life, well, I completely forget about my friend Jim. You know, because I'm scared now. It's me. You know, oh, that was Jim. You know, he's a great believer and he got through it. But I think, you know, my friend Charlie, one of the last things he said to me the night I was there was, Ralph, I had 6+ years of the love of my life. You know, it's a miracle. You know, and I think we have short memories that we quickly forget all the things around us that God has shown us, you know, that are what he can do and what he does do. But then we're in our own storm and we forget all about those things, you know, that are right in front of us. Right.
You know, Ralph, and you mentioned that the kids were singing hymns. Hymns come out of this very message that God is with us. Think of all the hymns that we learned as growing up in the church. Think about people who didn't learn those hymns. I mean, you know, from the beginning, the armies would sing "Onward, Christian Soldiers" and all this. But just think of all the hymns that speak to faith. And if you have those hymns, you've got strength right there. When the storms of life assail me, stand by me.
Right.
You do the best you can, and your friends misunderstand. The hymns are a sermon all of their own. They grew out of great pain, and it's a lesson to be passed on from the hymn writer.
Exactly.
Was that your singing or were you just talking? I don't remember singing.
Oh, I can't sing. That would be blasphemy to sing. I can talk it.
Yeah.
As you talk about the children singing hymns, yesterday, Les pulled the Heart to Heart trailer all over to our house, and we took on the task of putting new fenders on either side of it. And our neighbor who lives across the street, we heard this singing and couldn't figure out what it was. And he had Kumbaya turned up to about 80 decibels. It was just amazing. I thought that's a great reminder. And he was there with everybody.
Phyllis helped Carol plan her memorial service. And since then, and I'm sure some of you who, if you're thinking not too far ahead, you might want to think about what hymns that you would like sung at your memorial service. And Elaine and I talked about that. Well, the trouble is, I've got a list so long, it's going to be longer than Chuck Taylor's funeral. And I don't think anybody's going to like that.
You sing.
People are showing about halfway through. Yeah.
Yes, sir, Bill. Yes, sir.
My wife has something to say.
Oh, I'm sorry. We don't want to miss that.
Well, I'm going to take a real right turn. You want to turn off your... I want to defend Peter. You know, Peter did get out of the boat.
Right.
A lot of us miss opportunities because we won't get out of the boat. And Peter did have the experience of walking on the water. And this ain't the end of his story, because I'm sure this memory came back to him many, many, many times when he faced a lot of storms. He remembered walking on that water and keeping his eyes on Jesus. And he remembered when Jesus got in the boat with him, how the calm came. And I am chiefest among those, kind of like Ralph was saying, we forget. But God gives us this wonderful gift of memory to remember what God has done in the past. And I know that helps me have faith and trust and hope for the future, because I have experienced getting out of the boat and experiencing Jesus' calm. Roger, I wanted to ask you, what is that quote? I can't get it right, and I know you'll get it right because your memory is so good. That quote that always is at the bottom of your emails
Well,
about you never know the.
for a long time, I had that you can't know the strength of your anchor until you have felt the fury of the storm.
That's right. That's powerful.
It is, and I, I changed the byline at the end of my emails for some reason, but that was, during taking care of Carol. And, it's funny, you forget you have it on there.
Yeah.
And I remember many times I would send an email to someone and they would come back and ignore the content of my email, and they'd say, I really like your quote. In fact, after a condo was pretty much destroyed and I had to file claims with the Texas windstorm insurance, the adjuster came back and he denied a lot of my claims, but he says, I really appreciated your quote at the end of your email. And he said that's sustained the whatever was going through in his life. I mean, he wasn't involved in that storm, but everybody has storms.
When he had to say no.
Yeah, say no on
I really did have $100,000 in there in a safe, and I couldn't. I claimed it.
Now we know. Well, I think we've come to our end of our time. Thank you all so much. We'll tune in next week, and Ralph, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you, Bill and Phyllis.
Well,
Yeah.
what a great job. Let's thank Jim, brother Jim. So, thank you, Jim. Always, and Max has just a way of telling a story. And I can't help but think of our resident author, Phyllis, and there's a lot of similarities, Phyllis, into how you write and how Max writes, and how Max speaks, and such. And I know many of y'all have been to the Holy Land. I think many of y'all have probably been on the Sea of Galilee, and stuff. And we have, on the Thursday morning men's group I'm part of at Oak Hills, Max comes in twice a year or so, and does a lesson for us. And a lot of times it's also to promote the next trip going to Israel, in the group, and they always sell out. There's generally not an empty seat when he goes, he's teaching a group, and stuff. So tremendous morning, tremendous lesson. And, I really appreciate you sharing, your own personal story as always, and the storms that, are all around us, in summer, especially in focus right now, as we hear the rivers are rising again, in Kerrville, and that means coming downstream, so please be in prayer for all those folks and be safe as you're out traveling, this week as well. So we hope to see you next week. We will continue on with Mr. Jim.
Larry, Ralph, I want to say one word, and that is I want to agree with Phyllis 1,000%. Those of you who are going through hard times, like I'm glad to see Joyce. I'm glad to see you here today, Joyce. We live in a day where people say, move on, look at the future, forget the past, start your new life, all that stuff. Every one of us have to fight that modern idea. But the fact is, the most important thing you can do next to staying your eye on Jesus is keeping your eye on your past. We are a people who do not live in the moment and in the future. We also live in the past. One of the most spiritual things you have are those wonderful memories, and keep looking at them, thinking about them, and telling other people about them. Joyce, just keep on. And all of y'all, keep on, because it's a great spiritual gift. You even have those in heaven, according to the Bible, those wonderful, wonderful memories. Thank you, Ralph.
Awesome, Bill. Thank you for that very timely reminder, for all of us. So, all right, let's be safe out there. Prayer list, everybody made it around on the prayer list. So let's get that out, and congratulations again to the Close Connections group, and here's to another 5 years, with that tremendous group. God bless you guys.